Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Oh, yeah. Hi, how you doing? I'm fine, too. Whew, it's a Monday. Those are always daunting. Monday, in fact. Oh, my God, it's May 1st.
Now you're in the shot.
I wasn't even in the shot. Oh, hi. Hello.
Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Got distracted.
Okay.
There we go.
How you doing? It's May 1st. Oh, my gosh. Everything happened so quickly. There was a blizzard in Kansas yesterday. I'm just saying.
The apocalypse.
Oh, yeah. So, where to start? Excuse me. So, I think what I'll do is start with this little bit about weather. Maybe quite a bit about weather. And I don't know how many of you take the New York Times. I have for a million years. I get it hard copy. I check it on the internet all the time. And they did something that has caused a lot, I mean, more than I think they thought. A whole bunch of people canceling their subscriptions. And what they did was hire a conservative columnist. In fact, a conservative columnist from the Wall Street Journal, Bret Stephens, who I had found myself in the last maybe 4 or 5 months or so being surprised while reading the Wall Street Journal's editorial pages that he seemed almost reasonable. And he clearly was appalled by Donald Trump. Not surprisingly, he got uncomfortable at the Wall Street Journal because their editorial page has just gone full throttle Trump. And Bret Stephens just couldn't go there. So I don't know how uncomfortable he was or what the heck. Anyway, somebody approached somebody and the New York Times hired him. Now, make no mistake, he's a conservative. He's also a climate skeptic. He's all kinds of things that liberals don't like and are appalled by. But I can't help but remember that in the course of, as I said, the last 5 or 6 months, I found his take on things to be sometimes surprising and refreshingly so. So I was of the opinion that he, has clearly a bright man with, different opinions who it was hard to necessarily categorize in stone, as some unmovable object. So he wrote his first column. I don't have it here. I read it. It was actually already in response to all the people who were going to cancel their subscriptions because they'd been making a hue and cry before his first column. And I wasn't wild about his column, but there were a few times in it that I paused. I didn't agree with him, but he made me think. I thought, well, maybe he's got a little bit of a point there. And this is on climate change. I mean, this is something that I'm all in here. Yeah. I got very little doubt. He has some doubt. So, I guess what I want to say is I think we're in a lot of danger. if we have gotten to the point where you throw out an entire newspaper with all of the great reporters, including on issues like climate change, because one voice in that paper, amidst a ton of liberal columnists, need I name names, said something that angers you, bothers you, you find, maddening. What has become of us? I mean, I'm sorry, guys, that is nuts. It's nuts. I'm not here to defend Bret Stephens, conservative columnist. I am here to say that he's not a madman, that he's a bright man, and that on occasion, if you dare to read him, you might find yourself agreeing with him. We will get nowhere if we continue to refuse to entertain, to listen to be uncomfortable, I don't even know, I can't believe that people don't see how dangerous this is. Our unwillingness to listen to each other. It's dangerous. I fight all the time my inclination to turn away the minute somebody says something I don't like, to discount everything then they say. If we get ourselves to that point, we're never, ever going to be able to solve the problems we need to solve, because they won't be solved by everybody petulantly staying in their corners and refusing to talk. We see this manifested on college campuses, and everybody's saying, well, those kids, oh my God, they don't understand. No, it's not the kids. It's the kids. It's their parents. It's their grandparents. It's all of us now. So unbelievably partisan that we cannot acknowledge or bear to listen to a different point of view. That's bad. Bret Stephens is not the devil. Bret Stephens is a Pulitzer Prize winning columnist. And I will disagree with him, I imagine, 85% of the time. But it's that 15%. It's when you're reading it and all of a sudden something he says sort of, nicks you a little bit. And you think, huh. I think his column was really about certitude. And he ain't certain about the total cataclysmic. He's willing to entertain that, yes, that's possible, but he thinks that the certitude can drive really bad policy. And I think he's right. I think certitude is almost always a problem. Nothing has ever bothered me more in my life than people who say, I've got the answer. And often that answer is, the answer to everything, whether it's their religion, whether it's this or that. I'm sorry. Too easy. Too easy. So I just wanted to say that to throw out the bathwater and lose the baby as well is just an overreaction, and it's unhelpful, and it's keeping us heading in the wrong direction. We've got Tim on the line. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
Hi.
So I didn't read this piece, but I have to agree with what you're saying. It seems as ridiculous about talking to my conservative friends who have no idea of anything that has happened in the scientific realm of climate change since 1999.
Yeah.
As it is talking to my liberal friends who are opposed to vaccines, that they completely, I don't even know what corner they're in, where they just completely hide from anything that disagrees with what they hope is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess they firmly believe is the truth, despite everything that might be said. On the other hand, I wouldn't really turn. The other problem is, in both of those camps, is that they would turn to somebody who's writing an opinion piece as opposed to the actual people that do the research.
Right, as opposed to original
So,
sources. But most people aren't going to go to
Right.
original sources, especially in a scientific topic. They're not going to. I'm not going to.
Right. The problem is when the ridiculous politicians who were sending to Washington also turn to the columnists and talk show hosts for where the policy is going to come from. So, I mean, the guy might raise some interesting questions. I haven't read his piece, but I probably will look it up just to see what these questions are that he's asking. But, like, there is a pretty high degree of certitude when it comes to this topic. So, as like the last 48 hours of temperatures could pretty much tell anybody, not to mention the last 10 years of
No, but it just
temperature
doesn't.
records. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, we know that climate change is not the weather specifically. It's
Right.
this huge.
So, but the last 10 years of weather is climate. So,
Has been
but
very
I don't know
unusual.
How warm it would have to be.
Yeah, I
How
know.
warm would it have to be on the evening of April 29th before these guys clue in that there might be something going on?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. So,
Well,
I
see,
mean,
he even acknowledges, this guy acknowledges that it's that humans have had an impact, and a negative one, on what's happening.
So what is he saying is the policy?
So what he's
policy
saying is
change
he's
that
saying
proposes.
the certitude with which science, and he says that scientific projections are always so dire. Do we know that they're true? It's all data driven, as were, of course, all those polls, he pointed out, that told us that Hillary Clinton was about to become the first female president of the United States. He said we put too much into, I got the numbers here, I've quantified things, I know exactly what's going to happen. And in fact, the pollsters, who that's a different kind of a science, they were wrong. And he's just saying, remember that, okay? I mean, I think that's a legitimate
So we're talking
point.
about two completely different things. We're talking about kind of pollster reach people to really get their opinion versus how many decades of data from thermometers. That's like a thermometer gives you an exact number. It doesn't tell you like a percentage of the population does believe this or doesn't.
Yeah.
Those are
Well,
two
I mean,
completely different and incomparable things.
But don't you think it is really important to keep talking to each other,
I think
keep
that if
listening?
scientists in the 1980s or 1970s start making predictions that the temperature is going to go up because we're having more carbon dioxide in the environment, and the temperature goes up, sets record temperatures, we see increasing problems with weather per the predictions that were made. That doesn't mean that if they, that's every single prediction that they made doesn't come true, but the overall picture that they predicted comes true, then I don't see what the issue is.
Okay.
I mean, it's complete. There's no comparison between polling data and the data taken.
Yeah. Well, I'm not
weather
I'm not arguing that. I am with you. I think the scientists are correct. I am saying
No, I understand. I'm
to
just saying
throw
that
out the friggin'
I
New
guess I
York
should read the
Times
piece.
because they employed a guy who thinks maybe we should be a little more cautious about it, and who probably is a lot of other policy positions that I would find horrific. I mean, that's insane. That's what I was really talking about, not climate change.
Well, right.
And in
That's just
fact,
ridiculous. Like when if anybody that was shocked, I mean, okay, I wanted the election to go the other way,
Yeah.
but anybody who left Pittsburgh and drove, or even if you drove around Pittsburgh,
Well,
how
that's
many
true,
Hillary
too.
signs did you see?
just get out of the
And
city.
my phone bank captain kept telling me, "Oh, well, signs don't vote."
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Like
I
it
guess they did.
did.
Or all
So,
those
like-
all those rural areas, my God, you don't see anything but Trump signs. Yeah, but, there's no people there and cows don't vote. Well, I think they must have.
Yeah, that's what I was told
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, Tim, hey,
and,
thanks. Thanks. Hey, I've got some.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. I have some sort of ecological stories I wanted to share with you in regard to. I mean, I just wanted to say that about the craziness of closing our ears and averting our gaze from anybody who bothers us by their points of view. I mean, come on, if they're being civil, let it be. So speaking of all of this and climate change, oh my God, I came upon two stories this weekend. Well, one was one of the stories that, like, scares the bejeebers out of people and makes people like Bret Stephens say, oh, come on, this is just scare. This is fear-mongering. And let's not pretend that fear can't be used on both ends of the spectrum in different ways. And it took me a while after reading this to go back and see that what it was a worst-case scenario. Not the likeliest, a worst-case scenario of, gosh darn it, of seawaters and sea levels. And it says the doomsday prediction, the worst case scenario of sea levels. Now, that's the one that's going to get the headlines, right? But that's not the most likely. It's the one somewhere down here, which is not as. So I read the worst case one first and freaked out. By the end of the century, I'll be dead. I think most of you will be dead. But a lot of people won't be that are here, and especially young people now, little babies, all little kids going off to school today. They ain't going to be dead. And it says here that the sea level will rise 10 to 12 feet by then, compared to the previous estimate of 8. And that would mean New York City, New York City, at high tide, the sea would be 2 feet higher than it was when Hurricane Sandy went through. Meaning Staten Island is underwater, meaning all kind. I mean, okay? If it gets that high, sea level will obliterate, this is the good news, Mar-a-Lago. But what does Trump care? He'll be gone. Doesn't matter to him. And so this was an assessment from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the gold standard, it says, for climate change science. And no, this was not, but they said in 2013 that by the end of the century, the sea levels would have risen 1 to 3 feet. 1 to 3, 8 to 10. Who's to know? It's a big difference, though, but it shows how the prognosticators and the media by squawking about the worst case, the doomsday scenario. I read this at first and thought, oh my God, because I happened to skip over that. This is the worst case scenario. Okay, still in the ocean, but on a different ecological note, this is the story that blew my mind. It was front page New York Times yesterday. Yes, I still get the Times, even though Bret Stephens, I guess twice a week, is going to have a little column. There's almost no fish in the ocean anymore. Do you know that? If you got a hankering for fish, you better have big bucks. I remember hearing little things like don't eat. I was told don't order sea bass. It's almost extinct. Don't order this. Don't touch these things. It's all being overfished. Well, my God, do you know? 90%, 90% of the world's ocean fisheries, that's where the fishermen go to get the fish, are either fully collapsed, fully exploited, where there's next to nothing left. 90%. How does that not flip you out? Says here that there are unsustainable fishing practices being practiced around the world. And the biggest culprit by far, nobody comes close, is China. China has so finished off the fisheries in its territorial waters. There are no fish. You can go swimming in the ocean in China, go all the way out for a few miles, and I doubt that a fish is going to go by you. Maybe some fish that you wouldn't want to eat. So the government has been subsidizing these huge, huge fleets of what are called distance fisher fleets. And do you know where they're mostly going? Think of where China is, okay? They're going halfway around the world. They're going around Africa and up the west coast of Africa where the fish are, but are soon to be gone. They have totally taken all the fish that all those poor Western African countries rely on for food, let alone for their livelihoods. Estimates say that 2/3 of the boats that are out there are contravening all kinds of international law. Stop and think of what it'd be like to patrol the oceans. How do you do that? And a lot of the guys that are taking fish from other nations' waters do it stealthily, do it at night. They even do it. The Chinese sometimes have like frigates that go along with their fishing boats to terrorize any little guy in a little boat trying to get fish for his family. Chinese ships are so large that they scoop up as many fish in 1 week as all the fishermen in Senegal, for instance, catch in a year. And the guys in Senegal, there's no fish for them anymore. It was their livelihood. It's their greatest source of protein. The more I read, it was a pretty long article. The more I read, the more I just got sick reading it. I really did. One of the reasons these the African countries aren't really taking the Chinese on is China has been in Africa for, decades now, throwing their money around, helping governments there build highways, infrastructure. And so, on the one hand, to bite the hand that's feeding it thusly would put in jeopardy. They don't know what to do, and the corruption there is beyond belief. So you have these millions of fishermen with nothing to catch. You got higher food prices for people who have hardly 2 little pennies to put together. one of the people in Senegal, one of the government leaders, says we are facing an unprecedented crisis. Meanwhile, back in China, you know how big China's fishing industry is? It employs 14 million people. It's the world's biggest seafood exporter. Its people consume 1/3 of all the fish that are consumed. 30 million people rely on the fishing industry for their employment as well. So that brings up the number of Chinese whose income comes from fishing is 44 million people. There are no traditional fishing grounds left in China. They have taken every fish out of them. So they're plying their trade around the Philippines, backed by the firepower of Chinese naval frigates. They have literally used them to drive away Filipino fishermen. And listen to what the fishermen in these who now have no source of income. They started to burn down the jungle, the coastal jungles, because they thought, well, we'll grow rice, but we got to denude the place first. So they've been burning protected coastal jungles so they can grow rice, and yet invariably rain washes away the topsoil, the land becomes useless. So you now have the fish being destroyed, the land being destroyed, and the people desperate. 2/3 of the population of Senegal under 18 years of age. And here's what one Senegalese government official said. Foreigners complain about African migrants coming to their countries, but they have no problem coming to ours and stealing our fish. Understandably, the fish that feed them, the fish that are their source of income. Imagine this. Some countries like Guinea-Bissau and Sierra Leone, you know what they have to police their waters? They got like 2 or 3 boats. One of them, who's the guy? No, and in Senegal, the guy who's in charge of keeping the Chinese out of their waters, he says, I don't have the resources. He says, I don't have speedboats. He's got like canoes. He doesn't have speedboats. He can't employ satellite imagery. And he does not have, as he said, a functional airplane. Think of those people up against the Chinese, who are literally stealing everything from them. And you think that doesn't have consequences? It does. People start starving. People are desperate. People move. They migrate. They become refugees. They go toward the very countries that have been eating the fish they used to eat. I'll leave you with a quote from a Senegalese fisherman. They leave us with nothing. We are powerless to stop them. Now we are forced to catch juvenile fish, which is like going into a house and killing all the children. If you do that, eventually it all disappears. Okay, that's an environmental story, right? There's a biggie. So we can worry about the oceans rising, or we can worry about the fact that we are taking the life out of them, even as the warming oceans destroy other life in them. And what are we doing? Nothing. I would almost say stop eating fish. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Mind-boggling. All right, we got Joe on the phone. Hey, Joe. Joe?
Hi.
Hi.
This is something different what you were talking about, but it's to do with the Republicans and Democrats. This tax thing, I'm amazed that the same story goes through every time about the lowering the corporate tax when they're only paying 14% now, and he wants to lower it to 15%, so that doesn't even make sense. And then a lot of them don't even pay taxes. So that big lie there keeps going on, which is amazing. But the one that really gets me is the thing about NAFTA, which I believed it for a while. And I still think it got a lot of jobs. But I was reading an article where they were saying it didn't matter if NAFTA was there or not. These jobs were going overseas because of the simple reason of the wages, as we always talk about. If Americans work for $3 an hour, you got a job. And you probably heard this about that Jennifer Granholm in Michigan, where she tried to get Refrigerator or one of those appliance companies, and they had all this money, tax cuts and everything. They said, no, it's the wages. But Trump seems to think, tells the people, and they still believe it, he's going to bring the jobs back and they're going to pay all this money. It's amazing that the lie just keeps going on and on and on. If that was true, how come the jobs here now aren't paying that well? So it just doesn't, you know what I mean? And then you got the robots and all that shit. But it just, I believed that for a while with the trade, but they said, and I remember this in the middle 70s when I was working on the railroad and the mills were going down. And it was going down before that, early 70s, late 60s. And it was outsourcing right then. And that's what it's all about, which we talked about 100 times, I know.
Yeah, I know. Well, here we are. Everything is changing, and at such a rapid pace that I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. And the fact is that people in these tumultuous times end up grabbing on to some set of beliefs that give them some level of, I guess, comfort. I guess. I'm not sure. I don't know. But yeah, you could have made that the call you made today. You could have made that call any day in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And another thing, this climate change. Okay, if you don't believe in climate change, don't you want clean air and clean water? It doesn't make sense. I don't get it. Do it for that at least.
All right. Well, you go talk to him.
Okay.
Okay.
I tried.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Okay. And we've got Clarence on the line. Hi, Clarence.
Hello.
Hi.
This might be the coldest thing I've say ever on your show.
Uh-oh.
There are just too many people on this planet. Just has to stop. Both the climate change and the overfishing.
Well, you know, the Chinese at least tried to do that, right? They said one child per family.
They didn't calculate into their hypothesis that they would be giving the females away. That's exactly what happened. They calculated into their hypothesis that people wanted male children, and then 20 years later,
there's no females.
There weren't enough females for the males.
Right.
Yeah, and then it still. I've been talking about this for a few years. There's just too many people. There's no way away from any of this unless people stop having babies. Yeah, that's.
Well, the problem is that the only people who aren't having babies anymore are Europeans and Japanese.
Western countries.
No, Europeans, Japanese, high-income Americans, middle-income Americans, and I mean, it is, what's happening is unsustainable because people who cannot sustain a lot of children are the ones having them. I don't know. What are we going to do?
That's one of those things where, it seems like people who are see hope in their future. People like you said, the middle income and upper middle income, they're not having children. So if that works, give people like a middle income. Just give it to them. What's that called? The universal basic income.
Yeah.
Just give people an income.
Mm-hmm.
Just give them money.
Well, that ain't going to happen.
To me,
and
that is not going to happen.
No, that's not going to happen. But you know what? It occurs to me that throughout human history, anytime the ecosystem cannot sustain the population, and that population then migrates to another place where they perceive that they'll have a chance, the people that are already there think, oh, no, you don't. And there are wars. Mm-hmm. And that's how we have depleted populations in the past. And if you think about it now with literally, what's the biggest issue? Immigration. What's the problem? Refugees. So this is happening now, and we are closer to war. This with the nationalism and the keep 'em out. This is how it happens. We're going to try, I guess, this time to just kill all the brown and black people. There are too many of them.
Too many of them. Let them die. Like you said, well, to be honest with you, there's so many of them that they won't be able to do it.
Right.
You can let them starve. You can let them die. War won't be able to do it because nobody's having babies. And so I don't think that's like a plausible thing. But it really doesn't matter, because the brown people are going to start killing each other because they're not going to have, until there's some kind of equilibrium, which I don't think. I actually don't think that the Earth itself can sustain it. Back to the whole climate
Well, there
change
probably is some way that the Earth can sustain the current population, but it would have to. The population would have to understand how to distribute in an equitable way the produce. You wouldn't have the Chinese able to go into West African waters and literally take all of their food.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have the Chinese being able to take all the Chinese food. You have to do something where, and I can't see this happening, some kind of international agreement that you don't overfish your own water. Because
we all have.
Still over. Yeah.
We all have. Ask the fishermen up in New England. Man, they can't. No one. Ask the guys down in Louisiana. No, we've done it too. We've all done it. We are such greedy, short-sighted fools. We really are.
Yeah.
All right.
You don't have anything to add to that.
Okay.
I'll add one more thing. We're doomed. Thank you.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. I mean, I don't know. Okay, getting off that just a little bit. Somebody sent me something I thought was just pretty good. And it has to do with people who are unwilling to deal with reality. And sometimes I think, well, who can blame them? Reality, as we've been talking about just this morning, is frightening. It's daunting. For all the brains and geniuses that our species has, we haven't made a dent in trying to figure out. Well, we have. We've wiped out diseases that used to kill. Maybe that's the problem. We should stop what? Stop the vaccines? Huh? We've wiped out all these things that used to kill millions and millions every year. Maybe millions and millions are supposed to die so that maybe our messing with things, even in that positive way, is screwing things up. I don't know. So somebody sent me this little thing. It was written by a professor of national security affairs at the Naval War College who is a conservative, old line conservative. The fact of the matter is that too many Trump supporters do not hold the president responsible for his mistakes or erratic behavior because they are incapable of recognizing them as mistakes. They lack the foundational knowledge and basic political engagement required to know the difference between facts and errors, or even between truth and lies. There is a more disturbing possibility here than pure ignorance. The voters not only do not understand these issues, but also they simply don't care about them. As his supporters like to point out, Trump makes the right enemies, and that's enough for them. Journalists, scientists, policy wonks. As long as the elites are upset, Trump voters assume that the administration is doing something right. The Washington Post recently changed its motto to "Democracy dies in darkness," a phrase that is not only pretentious but inaccurate. More likely, American democracy will die in dumbness. In every election, we must respect the value of each vote. We are never required, however, to assume that each vote was cast with equal probity or intelligence. Well, I agree with every word that guy spoke. I think he's got it right. So we have dumbed ourselves down to the point that maybe this doesn't work anymore. And I don't, which founding father said it? I do not know, but that our form of government requires, quote, an informed citizenry. And what we've got by and large is a misinformed, disinformed citizenry. I want to point out one good thing that happened. One wonderful thing that happened over the weekend. And it has to do with the Pirates, and it has to do with history being made. It has to do with one of our newest players. At least he's been with the organization, but he's now with the big boys. And that is a guy named Gift Nagope. And thus far, he's been a true gift. He is the first native-born African to be in the major leagues. And what is bizarre, that whole continent, that whole continent, he's the first from that continent. Now the only continent that hasn't produced a professional baseball player is Antarctica, and I wouldn't hold your breath. And the Pirates, for some reason, are really willing to give shots to people that nobody else are. Because before last week, there had never been a Lithuanian in Major League Baseball, a native-born Lithuanian. And the Pirates brought a Lithuanian up, and he pitched against the Cubs, and then they sent him back down, and they brought Nagope up. And they have not sent back down. He's been playing incredibly. He's a little guy. But, again, the New York Times says this. The Pirates in particular have been eager to explore the world. Their signing of two pitchers from India, Dinesh Patel and Rinku Singh, inspired a bad movie starring John Hamm, $1 Million Arm. And neither of those guys from India did ever make it to the majors. They didn't get beyond Class A. However, you've got the guy from Lithuania now and the African, and after both their debuts, you know who came calling? The Baseball Hall of Fame. And they asked both of them to donate their caps because history was made. Pittsburgh Pirates. First African, first Lithuanian. I like it. And now back to the horror. Frank Bruni wrote a really good column. Before, I almost didn't read it because it was in yesterday's paper, Sunday paper, and I thought, you know, how can these columnists in this age of Trump keep writing columns of outrage? I mean, it's like you could write the same column every day, right? You just change a little thing here and the latest horror there, but it's all the same. We got the picture now. We know the guy a little bit. But Frank Bruni nailed it, and it's a very sobering thing. I think I knew it, but he put it so cogently. He said, you know, all the stuff that's being written about his first 100 days and what he did and what he didn't do and blah, 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 well, forget about it. The most historic aspect of this presidency is the fact that Trump has completely rejected all of the conventional norms and etiquette of the office. Might not seem like a big deal, but think about it. All the other presidents we have known, even the jerks, even Nixon, even can't keep his pants on Clinton, all the other presidents we have known at least have pantomimed the kind of qualities that the leader of a country is supposed to. The kind of qualities that you want to, for instance, teach your children. So that even if they got their fingers crossed behind their backs, they have attempted to show humility, honesty, magnanimity, generosity. And then we have Trump, who mocks those very values. And then Bruni says, think about it. We're 100 days in, and already people are shrugging, yawning at his latest horror, his latest petulant tirade tweet, whatever, his freshest assertion of something truly untrue is true. And they're turning away. They're saying, you know, constant outrage at this is what's it getting us. You can't impeach him for obnoxiousness. But beside all the mendacity, there's the grandiosity, which is appalling. But increasingly, and here's what I said, I almost didn't read it because I thought, how many times do I have to read about his latest lie, his latest tweet, his latest vulgar God knows what? But then Bruni says this, but when something no longer provokes remark, it becomes unremarkable. And the road from there to acceptance is a short one. So he does feel that we're already being numbed by Trump's vulgar, despicable presence. He points out that Jake Tapper, before the inauguration, but after the election, Jake Tapper asked Kellyanne Conway, remember her, about the fact that Clinton, that he was saying that Clinton, the only reason she won by 3 million votes is because there were 3 million illegal votes that were cast. Remember that? He was going to have an investigation into it. Remember that? No. Who can remember all this stuff? It was just the thing of the day. 3 million illegal votes. And so Jake Tapper said to Conway, I mean, come on. Is this presidential behavior? And here's what she said. Well, he's the president-elect, so that's presidential behavior. Yes. And Bruni said, she was dead right. So now everything he does, that's presidential behavior. And so from the moment he joined that long list of white guys, except that one black guy before him, he began to change the terms and the tenor of the job. And I think this is true. That's what's unsettling to me. That which was unthinkable now is the norm. And it means that other candidates will see that he won behaving as he behaved. And so, of course, our already tawdry politics will become more so. So the damage he has done has yet to be calculated, but I think Bruni is right. He's already done unbelievable damage to what was assumed about the public display of being presidential. And there's something to say for public display. It is whatever. No, so we got this president who's, palling around, having warm phone calls with an avowed murderer, Duerte, of the Philippines, who he's happily invited to the White House. This is the guy who called Obama the son of a whore. And this president, come on in. Love to show you around. The head of Human Rights Watch said this. By essentially endorsing Duterte's murderous war on his own people, Trump is now morally complicit in any future killings. Some of which Duterte has said he himself did. He killed people point blank. Before trial, nothing. This is the kind of guy Trump likes. This is a strong man, a guy. This is classic. He loves Erdogan and Turkey. Strong guy as he moves from a democratically elected official to clearly an autocrat. Trump calls and congratulates him on his election, which was dubious. And we know he likes Putin. And he's very palsy-walsy with Xi of China now, who's playing him like, just playing him. Our great negotiator in chief. And, oh, by the way, the other thing you should know about Trump and his fondness now for the despicable the Philippine president actually makes Trump almost look like a class act. And when Duerte won in the Philippines, I said, this is what this is a Trump guy. Exactly. But it turns out there might be something else between the palsy-walsiness. Trump has business.
Of course he does.
His name is stamped right there in Manila on a 57-floor, $150 million tower. He got millions from that deal. And then guess what? You might have missed this. This was in the news. Duterte appointed the chairman of the company that made the deal with Trump and the tower, the guy who Trump was dealing with for this Manila skyscraper, Jose Antonio, as the envoy to Washington for trade, investment, and economic affairs. You can't make it up. You can't make it. It's all right out there if you care to pay any attention. I do believe that it is a house of cards that will come down. But that is happening very, very slowly. The wheels of justice move very, very slowly, especially in a town and a country in which he has so much power. The Republicans, that despicable crowd, control 25 of the 50 states' legislatures. They control the Congress of the United States. They control the executive branch, and they control the Supreme Court. So if you don't think it's working right, or you got some complaints and grievances about government, I suggest you throw the friggin' Republicans out. It's a no-brainer. Okay, guys, that's it for May 1, 2017. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll be back tomorrow. My sister Susan will be joining us. Toodaloo.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.